Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Sukkah Daf Mem Tes is primarily Agadata. The Gemara begins by referring to the day when Klal Yisrael in the Beis Hamikdash threw their Sroigim at somebody who poured the water of the Nisuch HaMayim on his feet. The Gemara discusses how they had to fix the Mizbeach because of the chip. The Gemara proves that the Mizbeach is not allowed to have the chips. Then the Gemara discusses the Shisin, the place that wine was poured into the Mizbeach and where it was collected. The Gemara will bring a couple of opinions as to when it was made and how deep it was. This will take the Gemara into a number of other Agadic statements about tzedakah and mishpat and things of that nature. So the Gemara begins and it says that on the day that they threw the Yisraelim and the Tzeduki poured the water on his feet, some people were also apparently throwing stones, Rashi says, and it caused a chip in the Mizbeach. So they fixed it by applying salt in there. The Gemara says that does not fully fix it. It does not make it kosher for the avoda. It has to be properly fixed. But it was enough, at least, that it shouldn't look as if it's bezayin, as if it's chipped. Now the Gemara says, how do you know that the Mizbeach has to be whole without any chips? So the Gemara brings a source that says that the Mizbeach has to have a ramp, it has to have corners that stick up 1 square amma, it has to have a base at the bottom, it has to have the yisod, and it has to be fully squared shape. It can't be anything lacking from the squareness, and if there will be a chip, it would be lacking from the squareness. Now, Rabbi Yehuda adds it also has to have a seivev, it has to have the ledge that goes around at mid-height that the Kohanim could walk around. Now the Gemara discusses the shisin. So the Gemara, first of all, brings a couple of statements to show that the shisin, again, that is the cavity in which the wine and on Sukkot the water was poured on the Mizbeach. For the Nesachim, where did that collect? So the Gemara quotes Rabbi Rechanu, says that it's been around since Sheshes Yimei Bereishis, 6 days of creation, and to prove it, he quotes a pasuk. It says, Chamuke Yerechayach Kamei Chaloim Masa Yidei Uman. That literally translates to your hidden thighs or legs are like jewels. They're made by a master craftsman. The Gemara interprets it as Chamuke Yerechayach, your thighs, those are the shisin that are the foot. Yerech meaning foot. These are the foot of the Mizbeach. And they are chaloyim, meaning that they are hollow and go all the way down to the deep into the ground. And it's Masidei Oman, that's the handwork of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rabbi Bar Bachana is saying it was created by Hashem himself since the first days of creation. Another source for that is Tanna D'Bei Rabbi Shmuel, says the word Bereishis could be read as Bara Shis. Hashem created the Shisin. Another brisa discussing that is Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yossi says that they go all the way down and deep into the ground, like it says, Ashira no liyadidi shira as doidi lekarmai, karam hoya liyadidi bekaren ben shemen vayazkeyu vayisalkeyu vayitaeyu sayrik vayivin migdal b'soichoy v'gam yekev chatzev by psukim in Yeshayahu discussing Eretz Yisrael and the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara explains each of these phrases as follows: Karam hoya liyadidi bekaren ben shemen, that my beloved had a special fertile vineyard in a very fertile corner. That refers to Eretz Yisrael, which is the most fertile, fattest place on earth. And Vayaz Keyu, that means he made a fence around it to protect it. He built fortified cities around Eretz Yisrael, built with locked gates. Vayasal Keyu, he cleared out the stones, meaning he sent out the Akum that were there. Then it says, Vayata'eyu Sarik, he planted in it very special shoots. That means that he planted grapes, but not just grapes, but vines that go deep, deep down into the ground. It's high quality. Vayiven Migdal B'Seichai, and he built a tower inside it. So that refers to the Mizbeach, and the plants that he planted refers to the Beis Hamikdash. So Vayita'eyu Sarik is that he placed Hashem, that is, placed the Beis Hamikdash in Eretz Yisrael. Vayiven Migdal B'Seichai, he built a tower in it, refers to the Mizbeach. Then it says V'gam Yekev Chatzev by, and he cut a wine vat inside the tower. That refers to the Shisin. That's this big cavity in the ground where the Nisach would pour. Now, this is all three sources for the opinion that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it as part of Masa Bereishis and it went deep into the ground. Now these are all the Chachamim. Now the Gemara quotes Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, who says differently. He says it was man-made and it was a small space which filled up from time to time. And he says that there was a small space between the ramp and the Mizbeach itself. Now the ramp was not connected to the Mizbeach. We learned that in Maseches Zvachim. There was a gap there of some sort. Now we generally understand that that's a small gap, like a finger or two wide, but here it sounds like it was a much larger gap. It says it was a gap there and it was in the western half of the ramp. The ramp was 16 amos wide, so this is in the western 8 amos. Between the ramp and the Mizbech, and the Shisin were down there somewhere on the floor level. The height of the ramp at that point was 9 amos high, but somewhere on the floor level there was a large cavity, and once in 70 years, young children of Kohanim would go in there, or they would stick some device in there, and they would clean out the congealed wine, which looked like cakes of pressed figs, and then the people would take the wine, the Kohanim, and they would burn it on the and they would burn it on the Mizbech, but they would burn it b'kedusha, like you burn other things which have to be burnt b'kedusha. Now the Gemara says, what's the source? How do you know that they burned it b'kedusha? Like it says, b'kodesh hasech nesech sheichar la'Hashem. In Kodesh, you should burn the nisachim, which was sheichar Hashem. It's supposed to be an intoxicating thing, and it's supposed to be for Hashem. So the Gemara says, what's the proof from there that you burn it b'kedusha? The Gemara says the word kodesh is written here. The word kodesh is written concerning the burning of noser, leftover kapanos. Over there it says that noser ba'esh lo yachol ki kodeshu. Just like there it has to be burnt b'kedusha, here it also has to be burnt b'kedusha. So these are the two opinions. So now the Gemara asks, we have a Mishnah which is problematic to fit into either of these. And there's two versions of the following Gemara, where we assume it fits and how we fit it into the other one. So the first one is that this must be referring to first of all, let's quote the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if somebody uses nisachim, he uses wine set aside for nisachim for himself, he violates me'ilah. He used something that was a kodesh for his own purpose. That's me'ilah. If, however, he uses it after it's poured into the shisin, there's no me'ilah. So the Gemara says, who is this that says that if it's poured after the shisin, there's no me'ilah? So first version is that this can't be the chachamim, because the chachamim say it goes deep into the ground. It can't possibly be used. It's lost. The Gemara says, no, it could also refer to the chachamim, because it's referring to a case where somebody stuck a kli in there in order to collect it. And after it's poured on the mizbech, on its way to the ground, he grabbed it, and therefore he used it. The second version is we assume that this can't be Rav Elazar bar Tzaddik, because Rav Elazar bar Tzaddik holds that it has to be burnt with kedusha. If it has to be burnt kedusha, then why would you say that there's no me'ilah? It still has kedusha. It should be violating me'ilah if you use it. And the Gemara then answers, no, there's no me'ilah, because once a mitzvah was performed with an object, there's never any more me'ilah. The whole concept of me'ilah is only until the mitzvah was performed. So this wine, even though it's supposed to be burnt with kedusha, cannot have the halachos of me'ilah anymore, because its mitzvah was already performed. Okay, now the Gemara discusses more about the Nesach HaMayim. So Rish Lakish says, when they did Nesach HaMayim, when they poured the wine on the Mizbeach, they used to plug up the holes into the shisin in order that it fill up the top of the Mizbeach, and then they unplug the holes and let it flow down. What's the reason for that? So Gemara says, because like the pasuk says, "Ba'kodesh nesech hasech nesech sheichor la'Hashem." That's the pasuk we just quoted. We want it to be intoxicating, and so to be intoxicating, you have to have a large collection at once. So we want it to fill up and then flow down, not to flow down the whole time as it's being poured on the mizbeach in the first place. It says Rav Papa, based on that, you see that the reason for that is that the word sheichor refers to being full, a feeling of fullness. From wine, the Gemara says, comes from when a person has fullness in his throat. That means he has a big gulp of liquid in his throat. That's when he gets full from wine. The fullness of wine doesn't come from it being filled in the stomach. It only comes from in the throat. Therefore, if you take big gulps of wine, that makes you full. If you just sip it drop by drop, then you'll never feel full from it, even if the stomach fills up. Says Gemara, therefore, if somebody doesn't have much wine and he wants to get as much out of it as he can, he should drink it in big gulps, not in small sips. Gemara says that Rabbi used to do that with Kosher Bracha in order to get the most out of it because of Chivuv HaMitzvah. He would drink it in big gulps, not small sips. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, which we said about the Shisin, where we had referred to the Yerei Chayim. The Gemara brings that pasuk again. Now we bring the first part of that pasuk specifically, where it says Mayafu Pa'amayach Bana Olim Bas Nadiv. How beautiful are your steps and shoes and sandals, daughter of the Nadiv. So Gemara says that refers to the steps of Klal Yisrael when they go to Yerushalayim to be Ola Regel. And why are they called Bas Nadiv? That means that they're the daughter of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu is called a Nadiv, as the pasuk says, Nadivi Amim Nesafu Am Elokei Avraham. The Nadivim, the nobles of the nations gathered, of the nations of the God of Avram. Why do we call them God of Avram? What about Yitzchak and Yaakov? Versus no, because Avram had a special midah of being a Nadiv, because Avram was the first one to draw close to Hashem on his own. He was the first one to have the Nadivo slave, the generosity of heart, the spirit, to go find out about Kadosh Baruch Hu himself and draw near. That's what the Gemara calls Tchila L'Gerim, the first convert, the first one to come to Hashem on his own. Now, the Gemara goes to the end of that pasuk as we brought it before, where it says, Chamuke Yerechayich, that your flanks, your legs, your thighs are like jewels, the handiwork of a master craftsman. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? That the Torah is compared to Yerechayim. It's compared to like the thighs. Why? Because just like the thighs are supposed to be covered, it's supposed to be private, the Torah should also be studied and taught in private. You should not go make a show out of learning and teaching. It should not be a very public event. The Gemara says that's similar to something Rabbi Elazar said. What does it mean? He told you Hashem what's good. What does Hashem require of you? That's a pasuk in Micha. So Gemara says further, ki im asais mishpat, as the pasuk continues, what does Hashem require from you? Ki im asais mishpat v'avas chesed v'atznei alechas v'mashal lekach. Hashem wants you to do justice, to do kindness, to love kindness, and to go privately and quietly im Hashem lekach. Now, what does this mean? So, asais mishpat means to have court and judgment for laws of humanity. Avas chesed means to do kindness, to do milas chesedim. Tzneya aleches and Hashem lekecha, im lekecha, to go with tznias discreetly with Hashem. That's referring to going to funerals, taking care of the dead, and bringing a kala, a bride, to her chuppah properly and respectfully. Now, a wedding and a funeral are public events, and yet it still says tzneya aleches. You should do it privately and discreetly. So if you're supposed to do public things in a discreet fashion, you're certainly supposed to do your Torah learning, which is supposed to be private. You should certainly do that in a quiet and discreet fashion. Now, we quoted Rabbi Elazar's Agadata. Now we bring another Agadata from Rabbi Elazar, which is related. It says Rabbi Elazar, somebody who does tzedakah is greater than bringing karbanos, like it says, Asay tzedakah mishpat nivchar Hashem mizavach. Doing tzedakah and justice is better than Hashem than karbanos. Another statement from Rav Elazar on the subject: Chesed is better than tzedakah. Why? Because the Torah calls chesed kitzira. It says kitzru lefi chesed, and it calls tzedakah zriya. Now, kitzira is harvesting, and zriya is planting. So, chesed is compared to harvesting, and tzedakah is compared to planting. Which is better, harvesting or planting? The Gemara says harvesting is much better, because when you plant, you're a long way from eating anything. You don't know if it's going to grow. You don't know if you're going to get to enjoy it. But when you harvest, you're ready to enjoy it right afterwards. You don't have too many things that could possibly go wrong at that point. It says in more on Rav Elazar about tzedakah. On the same pasuk, "Ein tzedakah mishtalem es elef chesed sheba," says Rav Elazar, tzedakah is only rewarded according to how much effort you put into it, how much thought you put into helping the poor person. Like it says, "Zero lechem tzedakah kitzu lefi chesed." When you plant your tzedakah, you get out of it in accordance of how much chesed, how much work you put into it. Says Gemara further, a brisa on the topic of tzedakah. The Brisa says that chesed is better than tzedakah in three ways. Tzedakah is something you can only do with your money. You can't do tzedakah with anything else. Al chesed you can do with your money and with your body. You can do chesed with the guf. Tzedakah is only given to the poor, but chesed you can do with the rich. And tzedakah is you can only do with the living, while chesed you can do with the dead. Now, Rav Elazar continues on the subject, and he says anybody who does even a little bit of tzedakah in a correct, right way, it's as if you fill the entire world with kindness. Like the Torah says, Ohev tzedakah mishpat chesed Hashem malach haaretz. Somebody who loves charity and gives it with mishpat, with justice, fills the world with Hashem's kindness. Now he says, maybe you'll think that as soon as you decide you want to do chesed and tzedakah, you'll be able to just do it. Hashem will present you with someone with an opportunity to do it. So Gemara says not so fast. It says, "Ma'yakar chazdecha Elokim," how precious is your kindness, that it's not always so easy to get it. However, somebody who's Yari Shemayim, he says, will have the opportunity, like it says, Chesed Hashem Olam Vad Olam Ad Yereyav. Someone who's a Yorei, who's Yereyav, always has the Chesed Hashem forever on him. Another way to understand that pasuk, the Gemara says, is that somebody who has chen, somebody who has a sense of grace, is definitely Yor Shemayim, like it says, Chesed Hashem Olam Vad Olam. The grace of Hashem is Al Yereyav, is on those who fear him. Now, another thing that Rav Elazar had said, Rav Elazar said, what is the meaning of Pia Paschal B'chachma of Saras Chesed Al L'Shaina? He opens her mouth with wisdom, and the Torah of kindness is on her tongue. What does that mean, Torah of kindness is on her tongue? Is there a Torah of kindness and a Torah that's not of kindness? Torah of kindness means a Torah that is Lishma, that's learned for its own sake, for the correct reason. And Torah that's not of kindness is one that's studied for the not correct reason, that is to get reward, or something possibly worse. Now, another explanation of this is that the two types of Torah are a Torah that you learn in order to teach to others. That's a Torah of kindness, and Torah which you don't intend to teach to others. That is not a Torah.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.